Okay, we are back for another conversation. This is Company Growth Partner. My name is Jason. I am a digital marketing expert, branding professional living in Los Angeles, California. I'm here with...
I'm Matt Borka. I'm a revenue operations specialist and media buyer, and I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand.
Bangkok, Thailand, Los Angeles, California. We are Company Growth Partner, and today we would love to discuss some frequently asked questions regarding Facebook ads.
That's right.
We're talking beginner level access to Facebook ads, how to get started with Facebook ads, what are some of the most frequently asked questions about Facebook ads, and what we as digital marketing experts might offer as our responses to said questions. We've got so many. Let's just start, I think, Matt, let's just begin by discussing the fact, maybe a little bit about what we were just talking about, the fact that there are a lot of business owners out there who can absolutely see the value in Facebook ads, right? They see that there's this tool available. They're seeing maybe their competition using Facebook ads, and maybe these business owners have no idea how to get started with Facebook ads. I think it might be a worthwhile place to start. Facebook ads. Is it worth the effort, the cost? Should these business owners be using Facebook ads? Yay, nay, what's your opinion?
If you're really new and you're looking to start doing something like this, the biggest thing you have to take into consideration is profit margins. Let's say you're doing drop shipping. With drop shipping, your profit margins are not that great. If you're really squeezing it, maybe you can get to like 20%, and all the drop shippers out there can correct me if I'm wrong. But it's not like you're running a high ticket coaching business where you have the potential to have an 80% profit margin if you're doing everything correctly. And then depending on how expensive something called your cost per 1,000 impression is, that's how Facebook is charging you for showing your ads. And depending on how expensive that is going to be the ultimate determining factor regarding whether it's going to be worth running Facebook ads for your business. So I would say the golden rule is if you have profit margins higher than 50%, and if you're getting your customers online, so you don't have a brick and mortar business, then 50% profit margin is probably what you're looking at as a baseline. Because if you have anything lower than that, it's going to be really difficult to scale it.
Interesting. So that's super clear. You're saying if you're an online-based business, if you're not brick and mortar, if you're not person-to-person services, visiting human beings in person, but you're a business that is doing all of your business online.
Yes.
And you are managing a 50% profit margin, at least.
Yeah.
You really ought to be using Facebook ads.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you why. There are other advertising platforms out there. But if we started comparing cost per 1,000 impressions, but also cost per clicks compared to other platforms out there. So I'm talking about, LinkedIn or Google. You are going to pay more for clicks. With Facebook ads, it's still the cheapest. It's getting more expensive every year. That's very, very true. But it is still the cheapest. Google ads are harder to learn and also to get right. And it's also more expensive. You have less control over the auction. Therefore, you can waste a lot of money trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. With Facebook ads, you can start as low as $5 to $10 per day. Again, if you have good profit margins. That way, you can do a lot of testing. You are going to burn your budget on Google ads very quickly without actually getting any meaningful results. It's a good thing to start with Facebook ads. And then once you really truly understand your target audience, then you can start branching out, diversify, and then maybe test YouTube or Google ads for your business.
That's a very useful point, I think, especially if we're focusing on business owners who don't have a ton of experience with digital marketing in general, to say to them, Facebook ads are one of the most cost-effective tools at your disposal to not only test your creatives, that is your ad material, but also to identify your target market, right? Is that what you're saying? That's super useful advice.
Oh yeah, 100%, because it's going to help you accelerate the process, because there's only so much you can do with organic. Yes, you can do a lot, but then a lot of times what works well on social media, that doesn't necessarily 100% translate into business goals.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, there's a lot of dancing content on TikTok and on, like reels, and there's a lot of like funny, acting skit style reels and short form content out there. And those are getting a lot of views, but your business might not be suitable for something like that. Maybe dancing content is not your thing. So you are going to be limited to, for example, talking head style short form content. And what we have seen is, getting that right, like it's so much harder to scale organically, especially nowadays, because it's very difficult to have that balance of let's make the content entertaining, but at the same time, let's make it valuable and useful and tie it to actual business goals. And with ads, you're in a different realm. Mm. So you are going to be able to learn a lot. And yeah, you actually don't have to spend as much. Facebook invested a lot of time and effort into supporting smaller businesses by actually developing products more suitable for them. Like data sharing is a new feature that came out for Messenger ads that actually can help a lot of small businesses give data back to Facebook if they don't have a website.
Oh,
for example.
That's super interesting. So if we're talking specifically to business owners who maybe don't have a ton of experience using Facebook ads, so say they do have that 50% profit margin, they are an online-based business, they are ready to start running ads on Facebook. What would you say to that business owner in terms of the front-end metrics the key metrics they need to be keeping track of, I guess, as they start to run those ads?
So the front-end metrics that you have to absolutely look at, right? And these are your primary metrics because there are primary and secondary metrics.
Right.
So the primary metrics are click-through rate, also called CTR, cost per 1,000 impressions, CPM, and CPC, cost per click. So sort of the holy trinity of front-end metrics because they all influence each other. You calculate click-through rate by, you divide your link clicks with impressions. That gives you your click-through rate. Then you have a cost per 1,000 impressions. That's more of a given. You cannot really calculate it because the cost is going to be determined by, Facebook's backend process, and then cost per click, amount spent divided by the number of clicks, and that is going to give you a dollar amount. The higher your cost per 1,000 impressions, the higher your cost per click, because obviously advertising is more expensive, so your clicks are going to be more expensive. How can you lower your cost per click? By having higher click-through rate, which is basically the ratio of people clicking on your ads, and it shows you and tells you how interested people are in your ad creative. That's where you have the most leverage. And obviously, you need to look at purchases as well. But then in terms of front-end metrics, if these numbers are not panning out for you, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and think about different types of creatives to test, including copy and media.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's useful to consider your click-through rate as that initial key metric to help you sort of understand whether or not your ad creatives, the thing that you ultimately have control over other than the budget, the creatives and how they're made and how you film them, how you make them, whatever, those creatives can ultimately become the thing that decides how your entire ad campaign is going to work. Because that click-through rate is key, right, in terms of influencing those other metrics.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's almost an art to get that right, because you need someone who can help you design those creatives, someone who's looking at the creatives very differently from, let's say, a technical person. If you like music, if you like, art or theater or whatever, right? That is going to give you a massive advantage because that's the intuitive part of media buying, right? Like getting the creatives right, making sure that, there's something in that. And then reading the data and understanding the data is the science side of media buying. So you have to have both. More often than not, most hardcore technical media buyers are struggling with understanding why creatives work. They're just looking at the numbers. But then the art director or design person can really help to, well, this is why, because that green really popped, or that one is high production versus the other creative was not.
Yeah, and I mean, often just as somebody who's served in those art direction roles, working with people like you who is steeped in the data, you'll come to me with some of that information, and I will be able to say to you, well, it makes sense given that the target that we've earned the most money from is this, and that creative was actually sort of actually tailored for this other target that I was trying to, show you that it might have fit better for, but let's actually change the creatives to fit the target we wanted again, and that's like what we do as a balance. That's like the whole balance that we strike between data and art.
Yeah, exactly. And, great example. It can go as far as changing the color of the subtitles. If you remember maybe like a good year back, we had this conversation or discussion around one of the fitness coaches we helped. Oh, yeah, actually, the red subtitle doesn't work as well. So let's just switch it and do white.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? And then that creative popped.
Yeah.
It had like 2 million views. So again, like it makes a big difference, and it could literally be like little things, but you need the data person to communicate with the art and design person, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to make the right design decisions if you don't have someone on the team to actually read the data and really truly understand, like what are the differences between these creatives.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you've got this in our notes here, and it's a useful pivot now into talking about the fact that there's more emphasis right now on the creatives themselves in terms of how Facebook ads works than ever before.
Yeah.
And I see you put something in here, app tracking transparency. What's that about?
Yeah. So Apple introduced this new privacy feature on iPhones back in 2021 called the app tracking transparency. And with that feature, you as a user, you're basically telling Apple, hey, I don't want specific apps to track my data, right? So you're not letting them use your data. The big issue there was that, it got like pretty like political, because Apple did that without actually talking to these big tech companies like Google or Facebook, now Meta, the big tech firms. So actually Facebook had to take Ads Manager apart, and they had to rebuild the entire product. So going back to targeting, this big shift in 2021 had a major impact on how valuable certain data points are on the platform, because there's more emphasis on the creatives now. Because back in the day, prior to 2021, you were actually able to do a lot with like audience testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's test different audiences. Let's see which one works. And, that was the big strategy back in the day. Let's test like 10 different types of audiences, and let's see which one sticks. So there was less emphasis on the creative and more emphasis on the media buying. But that really shifted, right? So there's more emphasis now on the creative than the media buying. And it actually got better because you have less to manage. You have to be very thoughtful of how much you can expect from the targeting on Facebook. I would argue that you have to spend more time on figuring out what the creatives need to be like,
mm-hmm.
and getting that right, instead of trying to tinker and tweak the system. There are tools that can help you get better targeting. So for example, there are databases out there. There's one called Windfall. I just had a conversation with a media buyer friend of mine about it. And you can literally target high net worth individuals. It's insane the amount of data they have on those people.
Wow.
If you are in real estate, or if you're, you have a concierge service, or you're offering wealth management or risk management for high net worth individuals, that tool, that database can actually help you enrich Facebook's data. And this is super important, because you can actually tap into other data sources from third parties, right? And you can upload that data to Facebook and create audiences based on third party data.
Interesting.
That's super useful, especially if you're really looking for something hyper targeted, and let's say the creatives are not going to be enough to really, because you're not targeting quote unquote like the consumer market. Maybe your target audience is very, very, very specific, In those cases, an approach like that can be useful.
That's interesting. So is that what detailed targeting expansion is? Can you cover what that is briefly?
Now, that's a little bit different. So as more and more problems occurred, because, you know, media buyers love testing, right? But then it's a guessing game. It used to be a guessing game, literally, because you didn't know which audience would work. Now, as Facebook's algorithm got better and better, they realized, by the way, we can actually, don't worry about this. We can actually figure this out for you. So if you turn detailed targeting expansion on, if the algorithm finds a conversion opportunity or discovers a conversion opportunity outside of your target, your, what you put in there as a target audience, whether it's an interest-based targeting or a lookalike audience, whichever it is, it's going to go for the conversion if you turn that on. So it's really useful because the algorithm can do the heavy lifting for you instead of you trying to guess what works. It's a super useful tool, and I would actually recommend everyone to turn it on. There's actually another thing called Advantage Audience. Be careful with that one. That's a more recent tool, and it can really screw up your targeting because Advantage Audience is more designed for direct-to-consumer brands where broad targeting is really, really important. So the specificity of demographics and gender are not going to apply as much, just to warn you guys about everything.
No, I love this. That's super interesting. And I think all useful advice, especially for any business owner who maybe is new to using Facebook ads or doesn't know exactly which features to turn on and which to use where.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting. So detailed targeting expansion, super useful. The one that you said to be careful with was called what again?
Advantage Audience. Advantage Audience Plus. They have like these new, like everything has been rebranded recently. So everything is like Advantage Audience. That's a brand new feature, and sometimes it doesn't work as well. So you got to be careful with that one.
That's useful. And for these business owners, for anybody who's new to using Facebook ads, it obviously will seem complex at first. Matt's mentioning several features, and those are just a few, right? We're at the tip of the iceberg, really, with how Facebook ads can work, or in terms of the different features and possibilities that it offers. I think it's useful to discuss that there are a lot of resources. Obviously, we're of the YouTube generation. You can be watching tutorials on how to use Facebook Ads Manager. You can be learning about all of these tools by Googling them. But I also think it's interesting that you yourself, as an expert, you do reference a lot of resources on X, on what used to be Twitter, now X, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because there's actually an amazing media buying community on X. For whatever reason, that's like the hangout place for media buyers if they want to get together and have a conversation about data. So depending on who you follow, right, it can get really technical, but then you get to choose what kind of information you want to consume. So for example, I'm a big fan of Eric Seufert. He is very, 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 very technical, right? So I don't recommend him for everyone because, like if you're literally a beginner, maybe you're not going to benefit as much from, the high level macro data talk, right?
Uh-huh.
But then, there are other media buyers on the platform who are, maybe, a couple of years in, or maybe they're, specialized in e-commerce, and you can learn a lot from them because obviously they're trying to post useful content. Yes, I am an expert in this. Am I the only expert in this?
No.
There are other people out there. And I enjoy those types of posts because I get to see like a completely different perspective on a lot of matters. And, if you're interested in learning about media buying, or what it's like doing what we're doing, you can actually learn a lot from those people.
Right. X is just a great way to learn from people who are working with Facebook ads on a daily basis. And you're saying a lot of these people and in the media buying community, they're sharing technical advice, like they're getting really specific out there.
Yes, so there's technical advice, there's best practices, hey, do this, don't do that. It's great for beginners too, because you understand like how complex it actually gets once you get to a point where, okay, cool. So this is what the big boys talk about, right? Or girls.
Which they're talking about a whole bunch of stuff. So, it's useful to remember that it can get overwhelming pretty quick, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of information about how to use Facebook ads online, and specifically X, where a lot of media buyers are posting their advice and different tools and tips and best practices, like you just said. That's super useful. I think it's also interesting that you and I are trying to create a resource for business owners to better understand these platforms and how to use them. I think doing that in a way that's accessible, that feels like it's actually related to how these people would need to use these things on a day-to-day basis is super important in terms of how you and I are approaching this. So I think it's interesting that one of the things that we wanted to talk about too is like, if you're starting with Facebook ads, this is new for you. And one of the first questions, just from a design perspective, that you might have is, what ad format should I be using? Your format is your canvas. That's how you decide like the size of paper you're going to draw on, right? As far as I'm concerned as a designer. So it's a useful question that you are likely going to approach as soon as you decide to start launching ads. You're going to have to decide, do I do a video? Do I do a static? Do I do square? Do I do portrait? Do I do landscape?
The best analogy for this is ad accounts are like kids. Every kid is different. And as your kids are growing up, there are going to be issues and there are going to be challenges, right? And all those challenges are different based on the personality of your kid. The same is true in terms of ad accounts. More often than not, your ad account is going to be either dominated by images or videos. It's always either or. I haven't seen an ad account where, it's a mix of both. Never. It's always 80% of the effort and conversions are going to come from either videos or images. So in the beginning, you have to test both.
Interesting.
Because you will not know. And there are some variables that are going to help you. For example, in the coaching space, most people do videos.
Right.
But then that gives you an opportunity to perhaps try images. In e-commerce, images are far more popular, right, in some cases. But again, it really depends on the account.
Right.
There will be accounts where videos are more dominant, but I think that's really based on the product, right? Like if the product has a lot of cool features that can be shown with a video, then obviously videos might be a better solution. So again, it really, really depends. But your options are images and videos or carousels, right? But I would say that, carousels are kind of why don't we try carousels, right? It's kind of the thing where, let's have a carousel because it's cool. More often than not, your best performing ads are going to be either images or videos. And in an ideal scenario, you want to have both in the account because having variety is going to help you and the ad account to do better in the long run.
Which is a useful segue into this very massive question that, like, as I was prepping for this conversation, I found most business owners are asking this question. How do I know? It's a basic question. It's a very serious question, but they want to know how do I know if my ads are working? How do I know if my ads on Facebook ads are actually doing what I need them to do? Where would you start to answer that question?
There's actually a very, 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 very simple way to answer this question. And a lot of times, even media buyers like overcomplicating this. Do you see a lift in revenue since you started running your ads? That's it. That's all you have to worry about, nothing else. Because if we start to have a conversation around attribution and then how that all works, it's going to be very overwhelming and it's not going to be useful to start that conversation, especially if you don't have as much experience in Facebook ads, right? Yeah, sure, maybe if you have a bigger business, maybe you have a 7-8 figure business, those conversations are going to be more and more important. But at the same time, you're always looking for the same thing. Does my advertising cause a lift in revenue, right? And the metric that you're looking for there is marketing efficiency ratio. That's the best way to do it. You look at your bank, your top line revenue, right? And you look at how much money you spend on ads. You get your top line revenue, and then you are going to divide that by the amount of money you spend on advertising. And that's it. That's going to give you a number, and that's how effective your ads are. Now, if that number goes into the negative, then you have a problem, right? That's how you know when your ads are not working, because it did not cause a lift.
Just, yeah, from a very surface level standpoint, it's like, are the efforts that you're pouring into an ad campaign of any kind, but specifically, I guess in this case, a Facebook ad campaign, if you're pouring money into that campaign, but you're not seeing any sort of lift in revenue, then there's a good chance that your ads are not working. That's a very useful place to sort of start. I think if you do start to gain some traction with ads you're running, you'll find that Facebook Ads Manager provides like a lot of analytic tools for you to understand which ads are performing better than others, which that can all start to get a little convoluted. You mentioned some of those things a moment ago, like click-through rate is a key metric that you can look at pretty much across the board in terms of the platforms, but also the types of content that people are posting. I think click-through rate is a pretty standard opportunity to understand if your thing is effective, right? That specific creative.
Yeah, so click-through rate tells you how effective your ads are, right?
Right.
But then depending on what kind of ads you're running, more often than not, you are looking for actions, right? Whether it's generating leads, purchase, add to cart, whatever, appointments. You also have to look at conversion rates, because if your, let's say your landing page is not converting, you cannot really blame your ads, because people were excited about your ads because your click-through rate is high. But then people land on your landing page and then things fall off the cliff. Okay, so maybe I need to have a look at my landing page and then determine what I have to change there in order to ensure that there's a clear path from ad to landing page and then ultimately conversion. And the same is true if you're generating appointments with your ads. Let's say you're running a coaching business. Are you getting the right type of people on the calls? Do you have to do anything different about the ads in order to ensure that you're getting the right type of people on the calls? Are you actually making money? Like, do you see new customers in your Stripe account? And then did those people come from ads?
Right.
That's the ultimate question, really. Like, you have to have a look at your backend data too. If you don't look at your backend data, purchases, how many people signed up, add to carts, that sort of thing, that also determines how successful your ads are. So if you're not looking at those metrics, obviously you're going to have a hard time figuring out how profitable your ads are, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's key information in terms of just trying to even make strategic decisions. Like if you're going to shift the creative direction of anything you're doing, all of that information is useful. So I've always told you, as you and I work together, that the more information you can give me about things and how they're performing, the better it will influence the design decisions I make, just because it makes sense that I would better operate understanding what works and what doesn't work and what's gaining traction and what isn't gaining traction. I think it's also important to touch on the fact that attribution tools are super useful, right?
Yes, absolutely. So the other major aspect of Facebook or Facebook Ads Manager that has been affected by the app tracking transparency changes is when you turn that feature off on your iPhone. So let's say you don't want Facebook to track you, or Instagram. Facebook is not allowed to report your conversion, even though you bought from ads, in Ads Manager. So the data is going to be patchy. So a lot of some people, obviously advertisers were concerned about this. So companies popped out of nowhere, like Chippewa Whale or Hyros, and these are attribution software providers who can help you have a better understanding of your conversions, because your data is going to be patchy, right? If you are interested in data privacy, like there's been a massive number of states implementing their own data privacy regulations after after CCPA, right? The California version of they were the first ones doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now almost every state has it, and you can look it up if I'm wrong. But because of these data regulations, there are only so many things Facebook can report on. Reporting got significantly better, but the moment you start spending more, these attribution tools are going to be extremely helpful for you to really truly determine how profitable your ads are.
I mean, we found this with our clients that we would get to a place where we were like, okay, we are seeing, a significant amount of traction with the creatives. Everything is functioning the way it ought to be. Now we can have more detailed conversations around attribution, better understanding where exactly the traffic is coming from and which points of which ads are causing people to click through or make the purchase, right? That's like, eventually you're starting to amp up the synthesis of all of the data so that the strategy just gets more and more specific and more tailored to the target audience that you're better understanding, which you're understanding by using these tools, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, great example. There was one ad for one of our clients that we ran, and everyone loved it. It was a funny ad, but we were pulling in the wrong type of people, and then we saw a dip in performance, and we were trying to understand what caused it. Now, I had to go in and do something called a pivot table analysis, and I had to have a lot of data on my hands in order to ensure that pivot table analysis was successful. And because we were literally tracking everything, socioeconomic status, age, obviously gender, and what they do, what they don't do type thing, and that helped us determine that we actually had to step away from that ad really quickly because we were pulling in the wrong type of people with it, but actually the ad was doing well, right? Like that was the screwed up thing about it, that we were actually getting really good cost per appointment, but we were not getting the right type of people, so it had to be turned off.
Yeah, and I know exactly which ad you're talking about, and I like remember watching it get made, thinking this is different. Like I remember making that ad and thinking this is a good ad, I like it. I also recognize that this ad is very, very different from the ads that have been working for us up to this point. Like I remember as the creative sitting there and looking at it and being like, I'll be curious to see what this does. And then we ran it and we found, that it was working. The metrics were all positive, but the people that were coming through to our sales team were not the right candidates for what we needed.
Yeah, it was almost like we were advertising for a completely different product.
Exactly.
That was exactly what happened.
That's an exact example as to how the data can influence the creative direction, right? Like and you have to stay on top of it, because if we were distracted by some of those glossy numbers, we could have easily had begun to tailor all of the video content to that ad style, which the pivot was to something totally funny. We had gone from inspirational, tearjerker type material, that's kind of a stretch, but I guess that's kind of what we were doing. Yeah. So then this one ad was a very quick pivot to something very funny, very frank, very in your face, witty, funny, new. It was interesting. But again, we saw that it was bringing in the wrong types of prospects to our sales team. So we realized, okay, let's just go back to the creative direction that was already working. And it did. It worked.
But then again, in order to find that piece of information in the data, we had to have the right tools in place and the right processes in place in order for someone like me to actually do the data analysis. Because if we hadn't had those, tracking systems in place, we would have been completely in the dark and we would have never known what had actually happened. Like, it's very easy to make the wrong decisions when you don't have data. Because here's the thing, your intuition is super useful, but it can lie to you as well. So you will only be sure about something if you actually have hard data on it. And then, in the earlier stages of your business, yes, you have to rely on your intuition in order to make your right choices because you don't have enough data. But once you do, data is going to become your best friend no matter what.
And this is exactly what we do at Company Growth Partner. We work with our clients to understand the data around their digital marketing efforts, and then we provide creative direction, that is informed by those numbers, because we believe that the data should be king. The data holds all of the information you need to amplify your marketing efforts. And if you're looking for that type of advice, that type of assistance, you should click the link. We've got a link in our bio. We would love for you to check out what it is that we do at Company Growth Partner. Yeah, Matt?
Absolutely.